It started, like most bad ideas do, with a loud noise and an alien ship that didn't read the damn signs. Hank Greeley had just settled into his beat-up folding chair, coffee in one hand, dog asleep underfoot, and a sunrise the color of honey melting across the sky. His wheat field stretched for miles, nothing but golden peace and the occasional whisper of wind through stalks. Then the sky screamed, and all of that peace got incinerated in 3 seconds flat. A starship, black, jagged, and about the size of a courthouse, came down like a guillotine made of chrome, plowing a deep trench through 2 acres of wheat, flattening his barn, vaporizing 3 cows, and finally embedding itself ass first into the west pasture like some intergalactic suppository. The tremor knocked Hank clean out of his chair. His coffee splashed into the dirt. His dog yelped and took off toward the creek. Hank stood up slowly, brushed off the dust, looked at the twisted wreckage steaming in his field, and said one word, "Nope." Then he walked to the shed. On board the Zathari exploratory vessel Valak Thran, chaos erupted. Alarms blared in multiple frequencies, some of which only rodents could hear. Over 100 Zathari crew, tall, bony, 6-eyed creatures with translucent armor and twitchy fingers, scrambled to contain the crash's aftermath. "Navigation failure," hissed one. "Atmospheric drag not accounted for," cried another. "The ground. It attacked us." In the command pit, First Observer Jirkal reeled against a damaged console. "What planet is this?" he demanded. A junior scanned the data. "Blue-class sphere, designation, Earth, inhabited by carbon-based primitives." "Hostile?" There was a pause. "They are agriculturally focused. Then we will make reparations to their local leaders," Jirkal muttered, straightening his chest plating. "Once we are airborne again." He didn't realize they'd just made a diplomatic incident out of flattening Hank Greeley's award-winning pumpkin patch, or that there would be no airborne again. Hank had been quiet for about 10 minutes, not in shock, in calculation. He stood at the edge of the wreck, shotgun slung over his shoulder, staring down the hull as smoke rose in dark, greasy curls. Alien markings pulsed in faint red along the metal, some kind of language, maybe warnings. He didn't care. He pulled a toothpick from behind his ear and slipped it between his teeth. Then he spit once and muttered, "You done messed up." He walked around the perimeter, slowly, calmly, like a man inspecting storm damage. Occasionally he bent down, pulled up a scorched piece of wire, a melted cowbell, half a rake. He said nothing else. Then he grabbed a shovel, not to fight, to measure depth. Inside the ship the aliens continued repairs, unaware of the silent menace pacing outside with farm tools. "What is that vibration?" asked a technician. The sound was rhythmic, heavy, earthy. "Seismic? Number it's digging." Jirkal turned pale. "Someone is digging us in?" They scanned the surface cameras. There was the human, just one, wearing overalls, a ball cap that read, "Greeley Farm, established 1907, and a grim look that made Jirkal's secondary hearts shudder. The man was methodically moving earth with machinery that should not have existed at this tech level. A backhoe, a dirt compactor, then, disturbingly, a seeder. "Why would he use planting equipment on a crash zone?" one officer asked, sweating acid. Another replied hoarsely, I think he's treating us like fertilizer." By sundown, 3 things were clear. The ship wasn't getting out. The alien crew was too scared to exit. Hank had started sowing wheat over their emergency exit hatch. There were no demands, no speeches, no revenge plot, just farming, deliberate, defiant, and completely silent. He didn't even look mad, which made it worse. Inside the ship, a full-blown panic set in. "They're ignoring protocol," shouted Jirkal. "They haven't even attempted to communicate. What species does that?" The answer, delivered through a secondary sensor feed, chilled the command team. "Humans." The feed zoomed in on Hank's weathered face as he paused to sip from a new cup of coffee, this one in a metal thermos. He glanced at the camera with zero emotion. Then he nodded, just once, like a man who'd already buried worse, and went back to tilling. "Number your compost," and he walked away. By morning, the hatch was sealed. No one tried to leave. The field was quiet again. Birds returned. Clouds rolled in. Rain softened the scars. And somewhere beneath 2 feet of Earth's finest topsoil, 100 alien invaders learned about fear, in the form of a man who never raised his voice, never fired a shot, and never, ever, wasted land. The transmission reached the Galactic Concorde exactly 16 hours after the crash. It was short, garbled, and filled with static, cut off mid-sentence. But one part came through loud and clear. "He's planting wheat over us. Send help." Silence followed, then confusion, and then laughter. In the Grand Assembly Dome of Istral 4, Ambassador Grex of the Varnethi Confederation struggled to keep his composure. "So let me understand this," he said, blinking all 4 eyes slowly. "An elite recon vessel of the Zathari Dominion crash-landed and has been agriculturally suppressed by a single bipedal mammal." The Zathari envoy, Ambassador Sherlin, bristled. His translucent facial ridges flushed a sickly orange. It was not a suppression. It was a passive territorial rejection, with tools. "Like weapons?" someone asked. "Number shovels." The chamber echoed with barely contained snickers from various representatives. One delegate from the Serix Collective coughed out, "Are you sure it wasn't symbolic warfare? The humans have strange customs." Sherlin slammed his 6-fingered hand down. "He is not a military agent. He's a farmer. He grows vegetation. He herds primitive animals." "And he buried your ship." Sherlin looked like he wanted to melt into his robes. "Correct. Back on Earth, the wheat was sprouting faster than expected. Could have been the minerals from the crash. Could have been the massive amount of alien coolant now woven into the soil. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the fact that Hank had been farming since he was 6, and the land, despite everything, still trusted him. He didn't talk much. Not to the reporters crowding the road. Not to the drones buzzing overhead. Not even to the UN security agents who politely requested non-lethal de-escalation protocols. He just nodded once, walked the field perimeter, and kept planting. At night, the lights of the ship still pulsed faintly beneath the earth. Not in distress, just blinking, waiting. Inside the ship, conditions had changed. The crew no longer referred to themselves as explorers or soldiers. They called themselves subterranean observers. They whispered about the Surface One. And Jirkal, he had stopped ordering repairs. Instead, he stared at a hologram of the human's face, trying to understand how a being could carry so much judgment in a single look. "We need to communicate," said one advisor. "No," Jirkal replied softly. "We need to survive." A silence followed. Then, "Should we attempt escape?" Jirkal shook his head. "If we break the surface again, he might start growing corn." Meanwhile, Earth's diplomatic channels lit up like a bonfire. Everyone wanted to talk to Hank Greeley. The president offered him a medal. The UN offered him a seat on their Planetary Defense Council. China offered to clone him. Hank said no to all of it. He didn't need medals. He had crops to rotate. Reporters eventually gave up trying to get interviews and instead just filmed quietly from the road, hoping the man would say something philosophical while watering tomatoes. He didn't. He just muttered, "Damn rabbits," and adjusted the scarecrow. The scarecrow, notably, had a Zathari helmet on it now. The Galactic Concorde, embarrassed by the incident, sent a diplomatic team down to salvage the situation. They arrived in a sleek shuttle the color of polished starlight, touched down just outside the main field, and requested an audience. Hank didn't look up from his wheelbarrow when they approached. The lead diplomat, a pink, squishy species with huge eyes and a permanent look of offense, extended a formal scroll. "We come to discuss terms of reparations and peace." Hank reached for a nearby sign stuck in the ground and turned it around. It read, "Field closed for growing. Trespassers get harvested." They left within 10 minutes. One of them tripped over a pumpkin vine and screamed. On the Zathari homeworld, fear turned to myth. Children were told stories of the Quiet One who buried invaders alive beneath amber waves of grain. Military recruits were shown footage of the crash and warned that on Earth, Even farmers were a threat, and in hushed tones, officials argued whether to retrieve the buried vessel or just file it under lost to atmospheric decay. That debate ended when they received a new transmission from the ship's buried crew, a single image of a stalk of wheat growing through the control console. Back on Earth, strange things began happening in the field. The wheat grew in perfect spirals, the soil no longer eroded, animals returned, twice as healthy, and Hank, normally a man of few words, found himself standing at the edge of the southern furrow one morning, coffee in hand, and quietly muttering, "You're learning, huh?" The soil hummed faintly beneath his boots. A symbiosis had begun, alien technology and Terran land, forming something new, neither Zathari nor human, just farm. But not everyone was content to let the past stay buried. A private weapons corporation in orbit decided they wanted to extract the ship for research. They didn't ask permission. They just sent a dig team. They never reported back. Their last transmission was garbled audio, what sounded like machinery failing, and a single line, "He's got a scarecrow army." The company went bankrupt shortly after. Its shareholders refused to invest in any planet with more than 5 cows. And Hank? He didn't change, didn't capitalize, didn't get famous. He just farmed. Sometimes when he leaned on the fence, sipping his beer, he'd hear something faint below the soil. Not words, not engines, just breathing, not scared, not angry, just patient, like the land. And every year, come harvest season, Hank would pause near row 5, tip his hat, and say one thing under his breath. "Y'all stay down now, corn's next." In the deep, dark underlayers of earth, beneath loam and clay, below the tangled worm trails and root veins, something stirred in silence. The Valak Thrawn was no longer a vessel. It was a seed, and Hank Greeley had become the rain. First Officer Jirkal stood at the central hub of the buried ship, staring at the internal biosensors with a distant look in all 6 of his eyes. "Report," he said. "We've lost propulsion," said the engineer. "Not because of damage, because the system's converting itself into something else." "Into what?" Jirkal snapped. The response came from the ship's AI core, now flickering with unexpected green vines wrapping the conduits. "Agricultural optimization protocol activated." Jirkal blinked. "Why would you optimize farming?" The ship answered with one word: survival. There was no follow-up, no clarification, just a quiet beep, and the smell of wheat. Above ground, it was a Tuesday, and Tuesday meant Hank did his supply run. He drove into town in a rusted pickup truck held together by duct tape, stubbornness, and one deeply wedged pocket knife. Locals greeted him like always, with wary nods and grateful smiles, but lately they made space when he walked past. The rumor mill had upgraded him from eccentric to galactically dangerous. Hank didn't care. He bought seeds, new boots, and a bag of marshmallows because he liked roasting them by the barn, even if the barn was mostly rubble now. At checkout, the cashier leaned in and whispered, "You know there's a whole squad of government folks camping down the road, right?" Hank shrugged. "As long as they stay off the field, I don't give a damn if they pitch tents on my roof." The cashier hesitated, then asked what everyone wanted to ask. "Mr. Greeley, what did you do to them?" Hank pocketed his receipt, gave the man a slow stare, and said, "I grew wheat." Then he left. Meanwhile, in orbit, the galactic rumor storm grew out of control. No longer a minor incident, the Greeley Field incident was now cited in diplomatic briefings, military textbooks, and political cartoons. An interstellar meme emerged, grain stalks with glowing eyes. A popular talk show hosted a mock human farmer, played by a Vrogath actor in overalls, holding a sign that said, "Get off my lawn," while vaporizing invaders. One admiral, testifying before a galactic security tribunal, summed it up best. "You want to poke the humans? Fine, just don't do it on their land. They'll turn your ship into salad dressing." Back on Earth, strange phenomena began cropping up near the Greeley farm, literally. Plants grew faster inside the field, not just faster, smarter. They leaned toward threats, repelled weeds. Once, a crow landed in the middle of the rows, It exploded in feathers 5 seconds later. No one saw what caused it, but the wheat rippled afterward, almost smug. One UN botanist declared, "We are witnessing a fusion of Zathari bioadaptive technology with Earth's instinctive flora." Another whispered, "The field is alive now." And still, Hank said nothing. He just adjusted his hat, poked a few rows with his shovel, and said, "Good yield this year." Inside the ship, things had gone weird. The command deck now grew moss between consoles. Fruits hung from power conduits. The mess hall served its last synthetic ration before being overtaken by vines bearing apple-like pods. One technician tasted one. He wept, said it reminded him of his birth nectar. No one argued. Jirkal gave up on repair logs. He started writing poems instead, about Earth, about dirt, about one man in overalls who never threatened them, but made sure they knew they weren't welcome. "Perhaps," he muttered, scratching another verse onto a tablet, "we are the ones being cultivated." He didn't laugh. No one laughed anymore. Only silence. And wheat. Elsewhere in the galaxy, high command across multiple species met in hushed emergency sessions. Some feared Earth had unlocked a new type of warfare, agricultural supremacy. Others thought Greeley might be the first in a new human subspecies, quiet, territorial, unyielding. The real problem? No one knew. Because Hank didn't talk, didn't tweet, didn't threaten. He just kept burying things and growing things over them. "Humans are evolving psychologically," one analyst insisted. "They're learning to conquer through passive resistance." The council chair rubbed his brow. "So, what you're saying is..." The analyst nodded grimly. "They're fighting with crops." Hank was approached again, this time by a diplomatic envoy accompanied by an actual linguist who spoke English without using a fishbowl helmet or hologram lips. The man said, "We come with peaceful intentions." Hank pointed to the field. "You're standing on my beans." The diplomat hopped back like it was lava. "My apologies. State your business. We want to know what the Zathari did to your field, how it's evolving." Hank gave him a long look. "You folks ever heard of compost?" "Yes." "Well, when you put the wrong things in the ground, sometimes you don't get what you expect." "And what do you expect?" Hank spat into the dirt. "More wheat." Then he walked away. That night the stars blinked a little brighter. The wind smelled like ozone and fertilizer, and something in the soil shifted, not dangerously, just watching, as if the earth had a new immune system, and its white blood cells wore denim. The last scene of the night came not from Earth, but from the edge of known space. A Zathari patrol ship caught a broadcast from the buried Valak Thrawn. It was a voice transmission, not garbled, not distorted, perfectly clear. "We have achieved balance. Request, do not retrieve us. We are becoming." No one responded, because no one knew how. There were no sirens, no plasma blasts, no skies torn apart by orbital strikes. But make no mistake, a war had started. It just looked like gardening. "They're planting what?" Admiral Krygoth's translator struggled to replicate the pitch of disbelief in the thickly scaled alien's voice. "Earth lavender," the technician repeated. "At least, that's what the drone scanners picked up. And rosemary. And, is that squash?" The Admiral's claws clenched. "That farm is growing more species than the planetary average. That's not horticulture, that's a message." A second pause. "Prepare a recon strike. Small, quiet, get me samples." The recon team never made it past the fence. They touched down on the edge of the property, cloaked, silent, with heat-suppressed engines and no electromagnetic pulse, perfectly invisible, except not to the wheat. The wheat leaned toward the ship, just a degree or two, but unmistakable. And by the time the first trooper stepped off the ramp, a root had grown through the intake valve, then a second, up the leg, and then nothing. The ship didn't explode, it sank, just gently, like a child's toy into pudding. The last drone image transmitted back showed 3 wheat stalks swaying over a flat patch of earth. That patch had not been flat before. On Earth, Hank Greeley stood at the edge of his property, sipping coffee from a chipped ceramic mug with a faded print of a cow and the words, "Mood of the day, tired." He'd seen the ship land, hadn't even flinched, he just kept watching. Eventually, something shiny poked out of the soil and thudded to the surface. It was a helmet, still humming, still transmitting. Hank nudged it with his boot, picked it up, and set it carefully on a fence post. Then he pulled a red ribbon from his pocket and tied it around the antenna. "No hard feelings," he said to the field. The wheat waved. Elsewhere, alien intelligence units scrambled. This was no longer a joke. Reports poured in from nearby settlements, plants changing their growth patterns, animal behavior shifting near Greeley's borders, solar panels spontaneously redirecting toward the property at dawn. Earth's own governments had no clue what to do. The UN proposed annexing the field as a global research zone. Hank refused. The US offered to build him a security wall and gift him a Corvette. Hank refused. China sent a polite letter asking for a sample of his wheat. Hank sent back a bag of popcorn kernels and a post-it note. "You'll want butter." Inside the buried Zathari ship, roots had overtaken every console, but no one fought it anymore. Jirkal sat cross-legged on a mat made of woven leaves, sipping a nutrient-rich broth that grew from a pulsating vine in what used to be the engine room. The crew had long stopped calling themselves a crew. They were now tenders, caretakers, interpreters of what they quietly referred to as the soil. One of them whispered to Jirkal, "Do you think we've been changed?" Jirkal watched a glowing stalk pulse in time with the heartbeat of the ship. "No," he said. "We've been invited." Then he looked upward and whispered, "He's teaching us without a word." Meanwhile, an emergency meeting was called on Istral 4. 100 delegates from 60 systems sat around the great spiral chamber, discussing what many now called the field phenomenon. One species suggested carpet bombing the area from orbit. Another suggested containment via magnetic field. But the Mizari delegate, ancient, wise, and slow to speak, finally leaned forward. "You misunderstand the situation," the Mizari rasped. "This is not a military asset." "Then what is it?" someone asked. The Mizari smiled with cracked lips. "It's Earth, purified, focused, one human, one land, one message." "And what message is that?" The Mizari's eyes twinkled. "Don't step on his." Field back in town, the mayor, an ex-firefighter named Gus with a gut like a beer keg and the emotional range of a rock, called a town meeting. Everyone packed into the high school gym. "This ain't normal," Gus said from the podium, sweat already soaking through his flannel. "We got galactic traffic outside of town like it's a danged tourist stop. Reporters, scientists, some sort of jelly thing dressed as a cow asking questions at the gas station." Murmurs. Someone whispered, "The cow thing was weirdly polite, though." Gus slapped the mic. "I'm telling you now, we don't sell that man out. Hank Greeley fed half this town during the 2032 blackout. He ain't our problem. He's our answer." Applause. Even the jelly cow clapped. Kind of. Later that night, Hank sat on his porch, shotgun resting lazily across his lap, watching fireflies flicker. A faint chime sounded from the barn. He stood, walked quietly, and opened the door. Inside stood an alien, not military, not armored, not armed, just curious. Tall, blue-skinned, with soft gray eyes and a breathing mask humming quietly on its chest. It bowed. I wanted to meet the man who defeated an invasion by planting." Hank scratched his beard. "Didn't defeat nobody. I just buried him. What happened after that ain't on me." The alien tilted its head. "You taught the galaxy something, about patience, about territory, about what it means to grow with the land." Hank shrugged. "I just don't like people wrecking my squash." The alien paused, then smiled. "May I walk the field?" Hank's brow raised. "Take off your boots." At dawn, the alien stepped barefoot across the rows, not a single stalk bending wrong. When it left, it wept quietly. "I felt the heartbeat of your home." Hank nodded. "It's not mine," he said. The alien turned, confused. "But you protect it." Hank looked across the field. That's why. The wheat rippled like gold beneath the morning sun. Dew clung to the stalks in shimmering beads. A wind rolled across the field, silent and slow, like breath from something ancient, slumbering, and awake all at once. The world had stopped watching Hank Greeley. Now it listened. From orbit, Earth looked unchanged. Blue oceans, white swirls, green continents. But zoom in on one plot of farmland in rural Kansas, and you'd see what every species in the galaxy now whispered about. A strip of land where a galactic warship once crashed, where vines rewired technology, where soil turned weapons into compost, and where one man, wearing a faded cap and a shirt with "World's Okayest Farmer" on the back, stood at the center of the galaxy's biggest question: what does he want? That was exactly the question asked during an emergency summit convened on Zarin Prime. "What does the human demand?" asked the 13th High Counselor of the Knicks. A hologram played above the table, drone footage of Hank calmly tossing seeds over a crater where a scout ship once sat. The Mazzari delegate, still old and still undefeated by galactic bureaucracy, answered without blinking. "He doesn't demand, he just does. That's what terrifies you all." They were right to be afraid, because the field had expanded, roughly 4 inches, but that was 4 inches outside the blast radius of the original crash, which meant something underneath had grown, pushed, claimed. Teams sent to investigate, gone. No violence, no noise, just gone. And every time one disappeared, a new type of plant grew above where they last stood. Lavender, lemongrass, chamomile. One botanist whispered, "It's peaceful." That's the message. A general replied, "It's a warning." Both were right. Hank's porch creaked as he settled into his chair. "Evening, boys," he said. No one else was there, except the field, except the stars, except the low hum that came from the ground now, soft and steady, like a heart made of root and memory. From inside the buried ship, Jirkal sat in quiet meditation. He and the remaining Zathari didn't consider themselves crew anymore. They were part of the field, nutrients in its purpose. "Soon," Jirkal whispered, "he will come." And just as he spoke, a ripple passed through the wheat. It wasn't wind, it was acknowledgement. They came in the dark. A covert strike team, pure stealth, 0 signatures, wearing exosuits woven from solar reflective polymers and psionic dampeners, the best the galaxy had. They made it 6 steps past the fence before the ground. Opened, not a trap, not a mine, a hole, and the team dropped silently beneath the surface, swallowed by roots so smooth and fast they barely had time to scream. By morning, where they fell, daffodils grew, and somewhere in the distance, someone heard whistling. At 11:03 a.m., Hank received his first official interstellar communication. It arrived on paper, delivered by a small floating robot. The note read, "We surrender. We apologize for trampling your field. Please don't make the wheat come for us. Sincerely, 47 planetary governments." Hank read it, flipped the page over, found a little doodle of a stalk with teeth on the back. He sighed, then wrote a reply on the same page. "Just bring back my cows." The next day, 39 cows were beamed down from orbit. Cloned, yes, but indistinguishable from the originals. Even the ornery one with the crooked horn and attitude. Hank walked among them, inspecting hooves and hide. He stopped beside one and gave her a long look. "You're not Mabel," he said softly. The cow blinked. Hank knelt, scratched her ear. "But you'll do." From the edge of the field, the wheat rustled, a gesture of approval. The final twist came not with thunder, but with a letter. Hank's mailbox rattled. He opened it. Inside, a yellowing envelope with no stamp, no return address, and writing in a language not from this earth, or any earth for that matter. But Hank could read it. He knew that language. His hands trembled only slightly. Inside the letter, "You passed. Will come home soon. Keep the garden alive. E.L." He stared at the signature for a long, long time, then folded the letter and placed it under a loose floorboard. That night, the stars aligned in a pattern no observatory had ever seen. 3 constellations blinked into new formations above the farm, and across the galaxy, buried deep in alien archives, an ancient code lit up. One word translated universally: return. In the end, no wars were fought, no cities burned, but every military commander, diplomat, and galactic scholar now understood one simple truth. You can invade a city, you can conquer a planet, but you never, ever mess with a farmer's land, especially if he's from Earth, especially if he grows wheat, especially if he says nothing at all. Hank stood in his field as the wind rolled again. Somewhere underfoot, vines pulsed in rhythm with something cosmic. He felt it, like a tide, like breath. He smiled faintly, then spoke to no one. "You're late, Eliza." And the field answered with the soft sound of 100 blooms opening.